Hi everybody, thank you for watching this video today. Just before we get started, we thought it would be good to introduce ourselves so you know who we are, who are talking to you. So I am Amber, I'm the Deputy Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Pembroke College in Cambridge. There is one in Oxford as well, but I'm at the Cambridge one. And I'll pass on to Catherine.
Thanks. I'm Catherine. I'm the Outreach and Admissions Officer at Corpus Christi College, Oxford. So I do all our outreach and also the admissions process.
Hello, I'm Susan and I'm the admissions tutor at Murray Edwards College in Cambridge.
Hello, I'm Catherine and I'm the admissions director at Sydney Sussex College in Cambridge.
So we're just going to talk you through the interview process for the upcoming admissions round at both Oxford and Cambridge universities, what the interviews are going to be like, what sort of things to expect, and then hopefully that will give you loads of information that will be really helpful in helping your preparation. So the first thing that we always want to say when we talk about the interviews is that whilst chronologically they're the last part of the application process, they're not the be all and end all when it comes to your final or the final decision that's made about your application. So they take place in December, sometimes the very end of November as well. But once we've done the interview, we add the information that we've gathered as a result of that interview to the pot of information that we've got about you from all other parts of the application process. And then when we come to making our decisions about who it is that we're going to give offers to, we take into consideration everything that we've got. So chronologically, as I said, they're the last part, but they're not the be all and end all. So please don't stress about them too much and think that's the only thing that the decision's going to rest on, because that's not the case at all. So the interview process itself is, so at both Oxford and Cambridge this year, the first thing to say is that they're going to be entirely conducted online. So all of them are going to be done virtually, so you won't need to be travelling to either of the institutions. Now, at Cambridge, primarily they're going to be conducted at the college that you have applied to. If you submitted an open application, then you'll be allocated to a college and they will take you through the interview process if they decide to take your application to that point. You will normally have one or two interviews, and there will normally be two interviewers in each of your interviews. And those interviewers will be academics in the subject area that you're being interviewed in. So the length, as you can see on the screen, the length of the interviews themselves will vary a little bit between colleges and possibly between subjects too. But the college that you have been invited to interview at will get in touch with you before your interview and let you know exactly what format it is. But generally, they're going to be between 20 or 45 minutes in length. And if you have perhaps one interview, then it's likely that that interview will be a little bit longer. Whereas if you have two, it's likely there'll be two shorter interviews. The interviews themselves will be very discussion based, or will basically be looking for the skills that are required for the subject that you're applying to study. So it's kind of nice to think about them as interactive aptitude tests. So yeah, they'll be academic in focus, they'll be asking you subject related questions. And yeah, that's the sort of thing that we're going to be looking for. Catherine, was there anything specific about the Oxford ones that we haven't covered here?
No, I think that's exactly the same as it says on the slide. Oxford, often you might get interviewed at more than one college, and that might be arranged at the beginning when you're initially invited for an interview, or you might be told that you've got subsequent interviews during the process, but you'll always have at least 24 hours notice for any subsequent interviews. So what we're looking for, all the interviews are specifically kind of designed as kind of conversations to enable you to show your motivation and why you have applied for that specific course. And you can further demonstrate your fit for the course, as you might have mentioned in your personal statement. So the interviewees will be looking at asking you questions and asking you to think critically and analytically about answering the questions with the information that you're given and any further interview information that you might be presented with during the interview. You'll be asked to kind of use the knowledge that you'll have developed at school and also through your further reading for your subject. And then, as I said, given kind of specific questions with new information and asked to apply that knowledge and information to those problems. And that might vary depending on the subject that you're looking at, which we will kind of talk a little bit about in a moment. So it's really important to remember that nobody is trying to trick you or trip you up during the interviews. So they are kind of designed to test your ability to analyze the new information, to think about the new ideas and arguments and materials that you might not have encountered before. So it's thinking about how you can apply the knowledge that you have to these new problems and discuss them. So thinking about how you're going about answering them, even if you aren't entirely sure where you might go at the end, you can start talking out loud your thought process, and that will enable everybody to see how you're going about answering those questions. But it's also kind of really important to think about the things that aren't actually relevant and that we're not looking for throughout the admissions process, but also through interviews. So we're not looking for kind of detailed explanation of any kind of extracurricular hobbies that aren't going to be relevant to the course or subject that you've applied for. We're not kind of particularly interested in the college choice. You might have been allocated to a college, you might not have specific, but that isn't going to play kind of a big part in the interview process or the questions that you will be asked. And we're also kind of not looking for any particular type of person. It's not going to take into consideration your appearance or what you're wearing. Just wear something that you will be comfortable in. And we're not going to be interested in kind of looking for people from a specific background. It's all about your fit for the course, your interest and your ability to answer the questions that you're answered. As Amber said at the beginning, it's not the kind of final hurdle. We are looking at all the information at every stage of the admissions process, including when deciding who to make offers at. So we're looking at the information holistically. So you don't need to kind of think this is my last chance. It's just another opportunity for you to demonstrate your fit and interest in the course that you're applying to. And we're not trying to trip you up. We want everyone to kind of perform their best at interview. And so if you're kind of asked specific questions that you're not expecting or given new information, it might be that they're just trying to encourage you to be able to think about the knowledge that you have and the questions you've been answered. They're not trying to kind of, as I say, trip you up and make you kind of second guess what you've answered already.
Yeah, so as Catherine and Amber have said, depending on what subject or course you've applied for, you may encounter different kinds of questions in your interviews. And if you've applied for a sciences course, maths or medicine or veterinary medicine, you're most likely to encounter some problem-solving questions. So across your interviews, you will have a few different questions covering different subject areas. And the idea is to give you the opportunity to show us your strengths and abilities in different areas that are relevant for the course that you've applied to. Usually those questions will also have multiple steps. So they'll start relatively straightforwardly, and then they'll build up in difficulty, always with support from the interviewers though. Usually the questions will be based on things that you've already met at school or college. And if it is something new to you, the interviewers will provide you with the extra information that you need to make progress with the question. Particularly this year, where we're kind of aware that people might have had different disruption to their education. If you haven't covered something in school, it's a topic you haven't met, tell the interviewers, and then they will help you with the extra bits of information that you need to start the question. You're then taking that stuff that you already know and applying it to a new scenario. And the idea is to test out how you think through a problem. Can you break it down into smaller sections, manageable pieces, and build up to some sort of solution in an analytical and logical way? So that covers all of science and maths. For medicine and veterinary medicine, you may also be asked a bit about your vocational interests. So if you have some thoughts perhaps about what it's like to be a professional in those areas, the interviewers may discuss those things with you, and that may be based a little bit on what you said in your personal statement. However, for other sciences and for maths again, there may not be very much discussion of your personal statements. So you should definitely expect to be focusing more on the problem-solving aspects that are relevant for the course that you've applied to.
Although some of the structure of an arts and humanities and social sciences interview might be a little bit different to a sciences and maths interview, quite a lot of the overall intentions are the same. We're just trying to get at it from a slightly different angle. So in the arts and humanities, there are a few quite common ways that we try and get you to approach questions and ideas and topics that you perhaps haven't thought about in detail before. and get you to develop the idea of an argument from those materials that we give you. So one thing that is quite popular across the arts, humanities and social sciences is to give you something in the interview, or maybe perhaps just before the interview, that you haven't seen before that you can then respond to. Now, the idea, of course, is not that you have detailed knowledge of this particular thing that you've been given, but we're looking at the way in which you respond to it and think about it and react to it. And that unseen material can be quite diverse. It might be a short piece of text, perhaps a poem, or a passage of text. It could be an artifact, it could be a picture, it could be a photograph, it could be a graph, it could be a map, it could be absolutely anything else. And I suppose the key thing is not to worry about exactly what kind of category of thing you might be given, but to think a little bit about how you might respond to something that you haven't seen before. And often a good place to start is to describe it. So to see what you see in front of you, and then maybe to just have some initial reactions to trying to describe what it is that you see. And then from that, different kinds of questions can build on it and ask you to analyse it and take the discussion in a number of different ways. Often in an arts, humanities and social sciences interview, we might cover a number of different topics within an interview. So we might have perhaps part of the interview dealing with an unseen resource, and then we might move on to a few unstructured questions around a topic of interest. So we might perhaps take something that has emerged from your personal statement, perhaps, or we might take something that's emerged from the subject discussions in the news or something like that, or we might take something that you've emerges from your application and we can see that you've studied before, and we could ask you some questions about that and ask you to draw out some of your ideas, particularly if you've written about something in your personal statement and you've expressed enthusiasm for it. We often think that that's a great place to start for discussion questions with you, because we know that you're interested in it and we know that you found it engaging, and we hope that you'll have something to say about it. And we also hope it will put you at your ease to be talking about something that you have expressed an interest in and have spent some time doing a little bit of research into. So we may take that from your personal statement and just delve into the issues a little bit further. So it's important to be comfortable with the kinds of material that you've written about in your personal statement. If you have put anything in your personal statement that was aspirational at the point at which you wrote it, it's a good idea to make sure that you're comfortable and have done the things that you've said you were interested in by the time you're called for interview, because it is totally fair game for us to ask you about the material that you've written in your personal statement. In some subjects in the arts, humanities and social sciences, you might be asked to submit some written work. And the college that you've applied to or been allocated to will provide you with details of exactly what you need to submit. But also, it's the same kind of principle as the ideas that you've expressed within your personal statement. If you submitted an essay, we would expect you to be able to talk about the arguments that you might have put forward in that, to be able to think about them and critique them, to be able to reflect on what you've done, and build an argument around it, taking on board opinions that might disagree with yours, that might challenge yours, and then to see what you think about the evidence that you've been presented with and whether you want to amend your point of view based on that or not, as the case may be. So it's an opportunity for discussion, and it's sometimes quite free form insofar as you can take the discussion in a number of different ways, and there's not necessarily a particular answer that we're looking for, but we are looking for you to show the kinds of skills that we want to see in an arts and humanities and social sciences applicant: the ability to look at and analyse information, the ability to build an argument, and the ability to take on board new ideas as you're presented with them.
So in terms of preparation for sciences and maths, again, really, because there's this focus on the problem solving, the first thing you should do is go back to your work from school or college and revise it really thoroughly, anything that's relevant for the course that you have applied for. Then beyond that, as you have probably already been doing if you're thinking about applying, is to engage with material and explore material beyond what you've met at school. And there's a list of resources here that allow you to do that, and many of them provide problem solving examples that you can use to practice your problem solving, which is the next point there. So taking your school level work and applying it to brand new situations that you haven't met before. And then finally, something that might feel quite uncomfortable to you if you're studying sciences and maths and you might not be very familiar with, is actually talking through problems as you solve them. But that's a really important thing to be able to do in an interview scenario, because it's the only way that the interviewers can guide you or show you possible routes through the problem if you get a bit stuck. So you need to be comfortable telling them if you're not sure about something, or if you need extra information or clarification, and you need to explain to them the way that you are approaching a particular problem. So you might want to practice that on your own, or you might want to practice it with a friend or a teacher, but just getting used to that is a really important preparation step for the interviews.
That's also really good advice in the arts, humanities and social sciences too. Talking through your ideas can feel a bit weird, but is a really good way of preparing for being interviewed. As Susan said, it may well be that there are connections between the courses that you're currently doing at school and the course that you've applied for at university. Now, that might be direct connections insofar as it's a similar subject that you're applying to, or there may simply be transferable skills that you want to connect from your schoolwork to the subject that you've been applying to, for the subject you've been applying to. And so looking back at the stuff that you've been doing at school and revising any relevant content and just looking at the way in which arguments are built and which you've started to assess evidence is a very good preparation for being interviewed. In all of the work that you've been doing to prepare for making an application to university, you've been doing lots of engagement and exploration beyond your subject at school. So you've been looking at resources outside your particular syllabus and outside the things that your teachers have been giving you. So you've kept up to date with your subject and hopefully expanded on your subject interest. That's possibly the kind of thing that you've chosen to write about some of in your personal statement. And that's also very valuable preparation to look over again in advance of the interview. Not because we're planning to test you on the content of all of the things that you've written in your personal statement, or all of the kinds of things that you might have done to prepare for making an application, but because all of that knowledge helps you to answer questions that you haven't encountered before, because it sort of gives you a kind of elasticity to your brain. You've thought about things that you haven't been given at school. And also it gives you a kind of a bank of other ideas that you can draw on that might be relevant in answering any questions that you might be answered. It's a good idea to do some of that looking at unseen materials in advance of clicking on the link for your interview. And practicing reading and analysing things is a really good thing. And that can be as diverse as looking at graphs and charts that you might find in blogs or in magazine articles or in online texts. It might be taking a small chunk of text that you see in a newspaper or in a journal and practicing reading it and summarising it and being able to convey the argument to someone else. Or it might be looking at a text or an image or a photograph or an artifact and just trying to respond to something like that that you maybe haven't necessarily encountered before. The more often you can put yourself in that sort of unseen, unknown situation, the more comfortable you're going to be when someone gives you something unseen during the interview. So practice trying to discuss your ideas. Practice trying to structure an argument when you speak to someone. That's more complex than just offering an opinion and then stopping. Try to sort of build in some sort of level of analytical detail to what you're doing and try and make what you're hoping to say clear as it comes out of your mouth. Don't worry if you find that uncomfortable. We know that you might be feeling a bit nervous at interviewing. There might be questions that you don't understand or that we've phrased poorly that you want to ask about. Don't ever hesitate to ask for clarification or to seek extra information if you need it. But do be prepared to be disagreed with by your interviewers. There's every possibility that they may argue the opposite point to the one that you have put forward, just to see how you react when you're given different information or a different point of view to take account of. And it's up to you how you deal with that. You may find that extra evidence plausible and want to build it into your argument. You may find that extra evidence not plausible and not want to build it into your argument. It kind of depends on how you've assessed and evaluated what you've been presented with. And so you don't need to blow with the wind and agree with your interviewers just because they've put forward a different point of view, but nor do you really need to dig in and defend your own position until you know, the end of time. So use that information sensibly and think about how it adds something or maybe not something to your argument, and then take it from there. So we hope we've given you a little bit of an introduction to how the interviews might work at the college that you've applied to or been allocated to. If you want any additional information in advance of the application process or in advance of the interviews, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. We are always more than happy to answer questions from applicants and prospective applicants. You can see the email addresses of the admissions teams at the 4 colleges listed here. In the meantime, good luck in preparing for your interviews and good luck with the things themselves when they happen.